Okay, hello guys, and welcome to I think it is the 14th episode of the MUN Command podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Sitting opposite to me, and today this is actually the first time we're doing a remote
Video.
podcast with video. We're trying it at least. Opposite to me, sitting is Jonas Bruns, former Secretary General of the MUN conference, wearing his Munica sweater.
Now that we got cameras, I should show it in the camera. Shout out to the Monica. I'm not sure anyone can see that because my camera setup is somewhat improvised. We sure will share images of that in social media. But just to give you an idea, I got my phone connected to my laptop as a camera with an ultra short cable, and all of this was a crazy idea, which seems to work so far by the man sitting opposite to me on the virtual end, Mr. Alex Cobb, also Secretary General of a bunch of conferences, namely the
I
ones in
think I was only
Constance.
one. Yeah,
Once.
I think it was only once that I was actually Secretary General.
I hope that doesn't take away from our reputation here.
No, but because
Well,
I always prefer to be like the shadow SG.
all right, Alex, what do we have on our agenda today, and why should people keep on listening?
Ooh, today's a good one. So we're gonna catch people up quickly on what's been happening on the MUN Command slash my side, and then we're gonna be talking about a hot topic, and that is how to be a great chair. And that is nothing to
Yep.
do with the fact that we actually building a software that chairs can use, but just generally like what does it take for you to be a great chair, and how maybe if you're preparing to be a chair for the first time, or if you're just getting into it, what can you do to really provide an amazing experience for your delegates? And like, what is your job actually? Maybe we should start with that in a moment.
That's a good one.
What is the role of a
And
chair actually?
and also let me stress that I read this question, like there's two big questions on the MU Model United Nations um, Reddit thread. The number one is usually, oh, I'm a first timer delegate, and so we will prepare an episode down the road how to run your first time as a delegate, how to succeed in there, how to be confident. That will come up in the opposite episodes to come. But today,
Yep.
the other big question on the Reddit thread we will address, as Alex said, how to chair. What's news
Yep.
on the Iron and
How
then
to chair.
yeah, we're having a bit of
Yeah. No.
delay, I
Let's
guess.
begin with that.
Right.
Yeah, it's maybe it's with the video. I think the video is a bit delayed, but the audio is live. Anyway, we're gonna start with what's been happening on my session. I mean, in command side, we had a crazy weekend where we had 6 conferences happening at the same time, which was that was really exciting.
Right. So those were in Hong Kong, in Astana, Kazakhstan, in Geneva, Switzerland, in Edinburgh, Scotland, in Naples, Florida, and in which one did I miss? In Strasbourg,
Um,
France.
Strasbourg, yeah, exactly. So that was really cool, especially because
Wow.
Strasbourg was a returning customer.
Yes, the first, one of the first returning, if not the first, was it?
Yeah. But that, I suppose, only comes down to them just holding 2 conferences a year from the looks of it.
That's right.
But that made it a bit easier for them. But we also obviously already agreed with St. Gallen that things are going to be exciting for their conference coming out in November again. Um, so really looking forward to that. I hope we can be there in person, actually.
So what, Alex? What happened during this week then, and what did we take away from it? Because I think there's one big improvement that people asked for, and that we have now already partially implemented. We hope.
Are we talking about speed?
We're talking about speed.
Yeah, so speed was honestly it was a bit of an issue, and generally our servers do scale, right? Like if we have more delegates, it's no problem, we can just add more power to it, or that's how it worked before. And that was it. Like we were thinking that that was enough to make sure that response times, so like whenever you do something in a main command, it happens on the server as well. Not, it primarily happens on the server. That is obviously because everybody can log in and it sees the same thing, so everything has to happen like not just on your computer but on the server as well. And the main difference, what that means is that the server has to be really, really quick to like receive and work with the things that you're sending it, and then the server has to send those things then back as well as a confirmation.
So essentially, if
So
I click on like whatever France to, if I click on France to add them to the January speakers list, then yes, essentially send a message to the server being like add France to the GSL, and the server will send back like an updated list. This is the people on the GSL, and it will have France on it. And this should be as quick as possible, almost instant.
yep, yeah, it should be pretty much instant. And so you don't normally see that, whether or the fact that the server has to do that. You don't normally see that because we built in what we call optimistic updates in a lot of parts. And I think I mentioned that to him before, which is your computer just assumes that the server is going to respond positively. So the lead speaker is already moved to the right slot on the list. And then it's sort of there in a holding position until it gets a confirmation from the server. However, if the server takes too long to confirm that, yes, that's indeed the position of the country is going to go back to the list, or like the country list rather than the speakers list. And then just going to hang out there. And then if eventually, though, the server does respond, it does throw the country to the right slot. That was happening because the server was taking too long. And it was just hard for us to understand why exactly the server was taking so long, like why it was so slow.
So so we switched to a different server, which now is the MyMun server technically, and we
Yep.
did a test on when was it?
Yes.
Saturday afternoon.
Yep.
With a lot of people that joined. At this stage, let me thank everyone who did, which was terrific. And just we essentially tried to crash the server with sending as many messages as we possibly can in a time as short as we can in the chat. And well, we didn't manage to crash the thing. It did become somewhat
Maybe we
slow.
shouldn't tell people how we try to crash it.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't. You should. Well, I mean, if you want to crash the thing, like I don't. Yeah, whatever. Well, we didn't manage
No,
anyway, so
like
good
yeah,
luck trying.
it's pretty much, yeah, we didn't manage. So exactly. It's pretty much crash proof now. So this is really, really good. And we're looking forward to having next conferences coming up. We also, like, there's so many details that we found like last Sunday. Then we sat down together, you and I, and we spent four
Oh yeah.
hours making a list of tiny little improvements that, you're not gonna see like a big difference. Like it's not gonna be like the login screen looks different, but in I think adding
No, but it looks
having them add
just
up,
less glitchy.
yeah, everything just it should be like it should feel more polished at the end of the day. And so it was interesting that Egan, for example, who obviously was with SGMon, was one of the first people to use the conference app at all. And him now having used it at a conference and be like, actually, you know what? I felt a difference already.
And that's terrific, isn't it? I mean, many people like in the feedback forms, when we see them filled out. Again, thank you to everyone who takes the time to share the feedback, because that matters a lot. And just yesterday, I compiled it all and made some statistical analysis out of that. Um, the general sentiment, I feel, is that yes, it's good, but it's unpolished. There's still too many glitches. And in case you find some of those glitches, feel free to also share them specifically, because finding them and addressing them is not always the easiest. But we now have a big list of, I want to say, around about 50 or so small, minor things, some of which we already worked on, some of which are yet to, be addressed, and just to polish it up further.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's going to be a really big, big goal. And um, I think, yeah, like those things are often such small and minor things, and it just takes a lot of diligence and going through again and trying all the different things for us. And you, as like a delegate, are going to feel like, or like a chair or whatever who's using it, are going to feel like, oh, that's such an obvious and small thing. I'm not going to mention it to them. But oftentimes it is
Yep.
actually those small things. Oops, that wine. Ooh la la. Not wine, obviously. It's just what is it? juice,
Grape water, grape
great
juice.
water, the great water I'm having here. It's been standing on my
I
desk for a
got
couple of days. I've got water too. There you go. Cheers. No, so
cheers to
yeah,
that.
if you
No,
see
but
anything,
Alex
even
is
if it's
right.
just a small thing, yeah, just let us know.
All right. With those updates from the MUN Command and from the MUN, and there's some great news. As you might have received our very ever first, that's not good English, diplomatic cables, which is our newsletter that we send out to, I reckon, around about 150,000 people from the MUN community on Thursday. And we're planning to do so starting from last Thursday, every second Thursday of the month.
Yep.
And
So
what you're
that's
going
gonna
to
be
find there?
fun, and it's supposed to just yeah, it's supposed to really just be mostly like light-hearted, entertainment. Some infos about international politics as well there, like maybe like a nugget of what's been happening on the sort of product side as well. But it's mostly supposed to be like nuggets and tidbits from the main community that are gonna give you bit of a smile, a bit of a laugh, and go about your life a bit happier, really.
And also share your feedback if you have any, if you received the newsletter, if you liked it, if there's anything you feel that we should add or strike or something. Really, I mean, this is not supposed to be like just us sending you something, but engaging in debate, as this is what MEN to us is all about, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And like, if you have any ideas for like what might be a great meme to include next time, or a great topic
Ooh,
to cover in the international relations or politics side, feel free to let us know, and we're gonna give you credit, of course. And actually, the meme that you found there in the last newsletter, the first one, came from Sarah Luna from GIMON, actually, who produced that during GIMON just the weekend before.
shout out.
A shout out. Kudos just in case you are listening. Anyway, let's get into our like main topic of this episode, which is how to be an amazing chair. And this is, having good chairs can be such a night and day difference for the delegates. And I think if you're a good chair, you're gonna enjoy being a chair more for yourself as well. So
Yep.
yeah, it really, yeah, I know it's important, but I think one of the most important things is not to stress out about it. Maybe Jonas, do you want to share how you usually approached chairing or being a chair?
Right. So I would start by kind of defining a bit what the tasks of a chair are formally, and then I would say that how this is lived and interpreted varies a lot, also across cultures, across MUN cultures, etc. Nonetheless, there are a few, I would say, no matter where you come from, universal best practice things that just help you, manage the committee a little bit. Now, that being said, what is a chair? The chair, well, sometimes referred to as chairman or chairwoman, is kind of like the, let's say, presiding officer or something, presiding over the
Presiding
procedures.
officer.
Is that a word? I don't know. It sounds fancy.
Well, we've just made it one if it's not.
Anyways, so you're like kind of, so to say, keeping track of the procedures, making sure that the procedures are adhered and followed, and there's order and so on. But you don't have an opinion as of yourself in terms of the debate. You don't participate in the debate, having a stance for or against in certain issue, but much rather you're supposed to be kind of the neutral voice that picks speakers and makes sure speakers are chosen and all this. But here's the thing: technically, you're just like an administrator, because who really decides is
Yep.
not the chair.
Yeah, so this is, I think, something that I like to stress when I talk to people who are about to chair, or also to delegates who are getting into MUN. It, fundamentally, it's really a very democratic process, and not a chair or like the president of the committee being determining what's happening or determining how people should act or behave or proceed. Really, it's always the delegates who determine what's happening and what's about to happen. And the chair really is only there to facilitate that, and to make sure, well, that's it, full stop, done. Now, because obviously we're working with an educational format, and students, be it high school or university level, don't necessarily always behave like diplomats exactly. Um, the chair also in MUN has a
Letting
bit of a
diplomats
role
behave
of
like
being
diplomats do.
moderator. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's part of the role, and I think so. I think this is the first step to be a great chair, understanding what your role is, and I think understanding that you're a facilitator, maybe a mentor to those people. That is the most important thing, and understanding that role rather than being the one who dictates procedures in the committee, or who who has to be strict about how things happen in a committee. And that is also how I like to approach sharing in general, where um, I I try to really focus on that role of allowing delegates to grow themselves, and to not having like the way not to have to enforce the rules of procedures is to like by taking measures like making people do silly things, right? The way to really do that and to make sure people do behave in a diplomatic sort of way is to set the right tone and set the right expectations. And if you set fundamentally an atmosphere, an environment of diplomacy as a chair, if you ensure
Of
that
respect.
you, yeah, of respect, and that you value those values of diplomacy, those the way you ideally have diplomats behave, that if you value that and really make delegates feel that and sense that, then they will from their own on their own themselves really act and work in a way that makes it really easy for you as a chair. If you're, however, a chair who's really like just sort of plowing forward and oppressive almost, obviously, then well, I as a delegate, I would like to challenge you there.
And that's always what I did as a delegate. Actually, apologies to my chair when I was in Harvard Worldman for that successful appeal back then. But that stuff happens because the ultimate power is with the committee. They have the power to overturn your decisions if they with a two-thirds majority. If they don't feel that is that you acted in their best interest, and so if two-thirds of the committee act against a measure you took, a decision you took, well then probably they have reason, a good reason to. So usually you shouldn't be appealed against. Yeah. um that just from that end. But again, as Alex said, this is a bit, there isn't any right or wrong. This is our experience and how we always approached it, how we felt like we managed to run committees successfully, also for the educational benefit of the participants and all that. And of course there's shades and ranges.
Yep. Actually, as we're talking about it, when you trade for the first time, how what was the experience like for you?
Well, so I remember I was in Heidelberg at a conference, and I saw the co-chair there, and I knew she was organizing the conference in Dresden, um, and so I just approached her, being like, "Hey, I thought that was pretty cool what you did, and I've never chatted before, but I would like to give it a shot. How do I do it? How do I start about it?" Um, and can I get an opportunity to chair maybe at Dresden at Altmoon? And so I had chaired. Usually, the best way for me, I felt like to get started is to start small, maybe in your local society. Maybe you have weekly debates or something. Maybe you can start as a co-chair, there and approach those that have a more senior role in the society, and then from there on maybe you can moderate as a chair debate in the society. And then when you go to conferences, to me that's always the best way. If you go to conferences and you talk to the chairs there, also you can ask them, hey, I saw you did whatever this or you did that. Can you explain why you did that? Usually you wouldn't do that in the formal debate, but maybe at the side at a lunch or something or in a coffee break. Um, all chairs I've met, and I can say that really for all of them, they would be happy to share their feedback and explain and guide people. Um, and this way you can kind of grow into it and then maybe approach those chairs usually um, to my experience the more experienced chairs they know where conferences are, they know who's organizing conferences, so usually they can help you in your application process to chair for the very first time at a conference, which I felt, well, I was lucky. I wouldn't recommend when you're chairing for the first time taking a huge committee. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone in general, because I always felt those like medium-sized committees with like up to like 50 people. I felt the most rewarding in terms of the debate quality. But if you take something like around 30 to 50 people for the very first time, that should be cool.
Yeah, like, but weren't you like nervous about how to implement the rules of procedure and those
Oh
sorts of
yes,
things
of
when you
course.
first went in there?
I think I never read rules of procedures more thoroughly than when I was chairing for the very first time, and maybe that's an unlike me thing because I tend to not prepare as good as I should. But back then, I remember I did. Um, you know, so the key things I think is number one. Um, okay, you've now applied for your conference as a chair. You are accepted. So the first thing that you will come across is either topic selection, or if the topic is already framed, writing a study guide. And it's work, but writing a good study guide will pay off later in the debate, because the debate quality, well, while it's not solely dependent on the study guide, a good study guide can have implications on the debate later on. Actually, Alex, let's make an episode about how to write a good study guide, because we could branch off into this a lot. Just in general,
Yeah, yeah.
um, like the key things I always include in my study guides is number one, further reading. So there's so much like stuff you research, and it would be such a waste to just throw it out the window once you're finished. So like include those sources, and make sure that the study guide is just a starting point for people to start with their research. And the second thing usually I felt was good, is defining a clear scope, saying what's still part of the issue, what's not. So the debate is not branching out indefinitely. And the third thing I would say is there's like questions a resolution should answer, which kind of goes hand in hand with the scope. So you can kind of give some first incentives um, into the topic, into the discussion and stuff, and you can then have case studies in there and all this, depending on how motivated you are. Okay, so now we have a study guide. The next thing we
Um,
prepare, then I'll hand it over to you any second, would probably be rules of procedure and software, right? And position papers.
Lots of things. Yeah, I mean, I want to just tag on to the study guide thing
Yeah.
there, and actually also to another point you made earlier, like about 4 or 5 minutes ago. So, first, regarding the study guide, I always had a philosophy of not really writing a lot in a study guide, but rather just providing delegates with really, as you mentioned, also in terms of further readings, but really making those further readings, quote unquote, the core of the study guide, right? Where I might
Yeah.
write like a little half-page introduction to the topic to keep everybody interested, so they have a rough outline of like what's relevant within the topic. But then, really, I just provide them with like a more or less elaborate list of links, mostly resolutions from the UN or other
Mhm.
international, other bits of international law, where they can really look into that sort of thing. Because I feel like actually reading resolutions and those kinds of documents prepares you better than anything else. So really, I always mostly
Right.
provided. This is a link to that resolution. That resolution is important because this and it covers mostly that. But so this is what I would write in my study guides, and I would really not write a lot more because I don't want people to actually study off a study guide, if you know what I mean. Like,
No,
I
but
don't want them to just be able to read the
I
study guide
absolutely.
and be like, "Oh, I'm mostly prepared now." I really wanna make sure, like, if in my dream study guide, it would be absolutely useless if if you read that, and only read that, you know, for the conference,
Yep.
because, yeah, there's really no point, and that's also where sort of the academic aspect in MUN comes to play, where it's like, oh, you have to quote things properly, and this is like a scientific paper. It's not. It's really not a scientific paper. It's like it's okay. Obviously, there's people with different views here, but personally, I feel like it's really a study guide. It's just it's just a preparatory document for some sort of like game, essentially, at the end of the day. So you don't have to like get too
Here's one
scientific
thing
about
I
it.
forgot actually.
Go
See,
ahead.
I was thinking one thing we forgot to mention should be like motivating people, telling them why this topic matters, so people are intrinsically motivated to research more,
Exactly.
making it
Yeah, why
cool,
it matters, why it's
essentially.
interesting, why it's exciting. That's really, really good to include there. Actually, yeah, before we go on to preparing properly for being a chair, uh, when I first chaired, so I never chaired before in a club, and then I went to Carmo in 2014 and chaired this like 40 people committee, and I had a really good coach here. Uh, and I was way, way too obsessed with being strict with the rules of procedure. So that was one thing I had to learn, is sort of letting go also of the rules of procedures, and not really counting um every procedural vote to the last
Yep.
vote, right? If you clearly saw, all right, there's a majority in favor, go. Or if you counted them and the votes in favor were plenty, just go. Don't vote to count votes against anymore. And that's what I had gotten as feedback back then, to just not be as strict about that. And that I struggled with that first, but obviously, yeah, that's the way to go, because really it's not about enforcing rules of procedure as much as it is about really providing the delegates with a great experience there, and you don't do that if you spend like forever counting votes, and I suppose that goes into MUN Command as well in a moment. And one other thing I want to
Oh
mention
well,
about my first time showing real quick is I wasn't sure like how to phrase all those things, because chairs always seem to
yep.
use those very specific phrases to like introduce procedural votes, or to when they wanted to have people on the speakers list, and it almost felt like there was like a code to it, or like an official list of phrases that chairs would use. And I wasn't sure whether I would have to learn those or things, or something like that. But I couldn't find anything anywhere back then. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna see what happens. But okay, guys, there
We
is
should
no
make a
official
list of this.
phrases.
Let's see if there's a list of that.
No, there is no official list, because
Why not?
really you're just
No, there's
explaining.
no official list, but we can prepare some stuff.
But it would be stupid.
Like that sounds fancy.
Like,
I
I
know.
mean, imagine you would learn all those things like from the top of your head. Like that would make the worst chair, because you would just be like a talking head. You could
That's
use
right.
Alexa as a
Like a
chair then.
robot.
Yeah, you would be like a robot.
Well,
But
not like you didn't
literally,
have that idea.
all the chair is doing there is explaining what's happening, and obviously using the terms that are also used in the rules of procedure. And that's when those things end up happening naturally to use a chair. So don't worry about it. Just explain to the delegates what's happening. And maybe that's also another point that's really good for chairs. Explain to delegates what's happening. People usually don't know what on earth is going on. So really take your time,
Especially
especially
those
when you
first
have a lot
time.
of beginners. Yeah. Uh, Explain what's happening. Explain what a general speaker's list is. Explain what emotion is. Explain how what you're doing at the moment fits into the general context of debate. Give them a sense for where they are and what they have to do. That really helps as well. I don't know. But you were going to go into preparation, weren't you, Jonas?
I was just one note when you were talking about the strictness of enforcing, like for example, procedural votes. Technically, everyone has to vote in a procedural vote, but then
Technically.
you know it's a very technical thing. Um, I remember one time when I was chairing a big committee, I felt like at one point, especially early on, you want to be a bit, stricter in how you do it, and then you can take it a bit more loose. So you kind of like wake people up, and some, like, I remember there's one time we had like a procedural vote, and it just wouldn't work. Like, it just wouldn't work that everyone voted. But I was like, okay, we're gonna do this once so we have it done right, and everyone knows like how to do it in theory. And after that you can take
Right.
it easy
Yeah.
a little bit. So there's, it always depends on the situation and shit, and stuff. Yeah. On that note, no, but right, we were talking about preparation, and yes, we talked a lot about, here and there. But preparation, the next thing would probably be getting familiar with the rules of procedure. Yes, we're all getting digital and
Yep.
stuff. What honestly I would always do is, if you're, not familiar too much with the ROPs, with the rules of procedure, print them out. Maybe I'm sounding old school here, but it's just good. You can
Oh yeah.
highlight stuff, you can mark things, you can make some notes, you can clarify things with the secretary general or the secretariat and stuff. I would always print out the rules of procedure and have them with me all the time.
Yeah, that's really, really valuable. And generally, also just having a stack of paper
Yep.
where you can scribble things, it helps a lot. It was more necessary. So if you're not sharing with a main command, obviously that's a lot more necessary because you have to take down motions on paper and all those things if you want to be efficient. But it still really helps to just have a bit of paper around that can help you do things. And when we're talking about preparation, yeah, let's talk about it. Obviously, if you want to share, you're going to be using some sort of software, even if it's just a time on your iPhone. You're going to be using some software. Be sure to know how it works, and be sure to try it out, and especially to be sure to try and cover all the different things that you will be doing with it. And especially so even with MUN Command, we try to be very intuitive. But when it comes to things like voting and amendments and all that sort of thing, that is just an inherently complex process. So be for yourself aware how you want to handle it, and try it out and rehearse it in your head. Because if nothing's worse, and I'm speaking from experience here, than getting to the amendment process and not being sure how you want to manage it, having to make it up on the fly.
Yep.
And that really helps your delegates as well if you give them clear direction in that regard. Um, so yeah, clear direction. Actually, that's something. That's actually another piece of
And
advice
in
that.
all terms, you know,
Yeah,
with your delegates, but also, big thing to be clear about is how you manage, how to, work with your co-chair. Usually what we found, I think both of us very, very good there, is that you kind of like have one kind of like managing and the other one kind of like talking, and one being like software. Usually that's a very good split, I always felt. And then you can take turns through the sessions. Yeah, maybe you take the first session with the, more talking stuff, and then the other person there's the whole like software stuff, and then usually that software person, I always felt it's good to do the motions there, because then they can be collected through there. With MEN command, then yes, I mean, you can have it all, have the delegates submit the motions through that. That works. Um, but having a clear
I
line of
feel like what's
communications is key.
Yeah, so being clear about who does what amongst chairs, I feel like, especially the software thing, it's sort of, I mean, depends who you're sharing with, of course, like how clear and dynamic it is. If you have clear communication there, who's doing what is really good. But I felt like, especially the last years, what's become a lot more important is communicating, like having one chair just communicating, chatting, be it with
Yep.
organizers or be it with delegates. And so that's been sort of one thing that's become a lot more dominant. So if and especially if you have software like MUN Command or Conference app, where a lot is automated in a way. So it's I think it's fairly easy to just share verbally, and also manage the software, or quote unquote manage the software, so that the other chair can then focus on outside communication with the delegates directly, or checking documents. That's obviously also a big one, approving documents, that sort of thing. Um, so that's where you can really work hand in hand.
Right. And then the last thing I think that comes up in the line of, preparation for the conference, is probably the position papers. Um, something that all people appreciate too much because it feels like homework a little bit. Um, for you as a delegate writing a position paper, yes, you have to sit down and write something. But I always felt like you know your position a lot better once you've like formally written stuff down, and it helps you later on in lobbying. But also for chairs, it's it's a great. Actually, I always felt it's a great opportunity to kind of get to know the positions and the also the strength in a sense of the delegates because you can sometimes sense it's not like who's writing a good position paper is going to be a good delegate. That's not something that has to happen, but still like from the quality of position papers you do get, you can usually kind of get a sense of, let's say, the experience that people have and the research they have done and the ideas they want to pursue and those kinds of things. So based on that you can maybe steer the committee a bit better, and it's like a sneak peek kind of into how the into the how the debate's going to run.
Yep. Um, for sure. That's really really good. And another another thing I want to encourage shares to do is walk around, especially when there's an unmoderated caucus, and talk to delegates really openly. Just talk to them, reach out to as many as you can, and not only when you feel like there's something wrong, but really try to get involved and be part of them, because that's when they will open up too, and they will come to you and seek advice and all those things, and that is really where you can show your experience and just be a human, right? And be kind and yeah, help them become better.
Yep, no, that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I mean,
Okay,
ultimately, it's about having a good time, getting to know people and stuff, and that's where this
absolutely.
counts into.
Yeah, it's mostly about having
Okay,
a good time. Obviously, if you want to be the best chair possible, you always obviously have to check out MUN Command, the conference app. No, I don't think we have to promote the conference app anymore on this podcast because we've spent hours and hours talking about it. Anyway,
that's
I
right.
think this would be fun to be a conversation. So, in case you have any thoughts on what we've discussed here, we'd love for you to reach out at Emian Command on Instagram. It's where we probably have the most live interactions with with people. Um, feel free to reach out
But
if you
even
want
in
to get
Reddit, be
involved.
it anywhere.
Be anywhere. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to engage in a conversation. I'm sure there's several points that we missed here, and you can get into surely a lot more detail and maybe even discussing the study guides is a whole different discussion. Even though we've gotten into it for a couple of minutes there. Um, yeah, we'd love to hear from you, and I think with that we can wrap it up, shall we?
Let's do it. Well, I guess because together we're excited to debate.
Better. And I hope that wasn't too horrible with the lag that we're having now.
I think that was definitely the longest break we ever had between
I don't
that.
know. For me, it was seamless. There was no break, so it will be interesting to see how it is when we export all the video and the audio. Anyway,
Well, we'll see.
commanders,
We'll give our best. Command is out.